I stood in the kitchen. I yelled, I cried, lost all control, feeling nothing inside. Off of the counter, I picked up a knife. I threatened right there to end my life. The police were called. I went without a fight. In a hospital, I spent the night. I woke up the next day, feeling confused, feeling broken, my body abused. I was losing myself, letting go of my grip. Down and down, how did I slip? I knew I had to change. I had to start the shift. Up out of that hole, myself I had to lift. I started to change. I began to heal. I stopped running from myself and started to feel. I started looking at myself again in the mirror. Through tears, I had me and held myself near. I asked for help and accepted it all. It was my time to get up, the end of my fall. I look back at that night, glad it went down, because it was the change I needed when I turned my life around. And look at me now, standing so free. Look at me here. I returned to me. I entered coaching, started looking into myself, and started healing myself. I went into my stories from the past. Overeating, shit-talking myself, and being dependent on drinking were symptoms of the real problem, coping mechanisms for my real problem. Even though I had become dependent on these things, none of these were my addiction. I was addicted to my victim mentality. Without the awareness of myself, and after living the way I was for so long, I didn't even realize it until I started doing the work on myself. I learned that all the stories I told myself could be changed. I could stop looking at them as the reason I was broken and start using them as my power. I realized that when it came down to it, all I had to do was look for the good, and see the beauty. And there is so much beauty. So I started living that way instead. I began to focus on what I was, what I could do, and who I wanted to be. I learned that the source of all love is self-love. I learned to relight my light. The person I am now could not exist with all that has happened in my past. I am so proud of those past versions of me. I am here now because of everything that has happened in my life. I get to choose how I react to everything in my life. I became my hero because of everything that has happened in my life, and I am grateful for it all. This is the story of my journey, and what a journey it has been. These are my words and my experiences. I have learned of so many gifts in this life, and that they were within me all along. I need to share those with the world, which is why this book is so important. Thank you for reading this book and taking this adventure with me. Remember that you hold all of your power, and you are already worthy of all that you are, all that you desire, and all that you will be. Your story may look different than mine, and if you reach for the book, you are ready to live in the moment. My moments are mine, and yours will be yours. What we have in common is that we both get to have journeys, and we are both on the path to feeling it all and seeing it all. If you want to live in each moment fully, you are in the right place. I will tell you how I got here, now, and I will give you the keys to the car that I used to drive myself here. Much love to you, enjoy, and remember, you are infinitely powerful already.
Awesome. Thank you, Kaitlynn.
Thank you.
That's a passage from your book that, so it was released literally today on Amazon.
It was released today.
Yeah, what great timing, right?
Yes.
So thank you.
Excellent.
That was, yes, your introduction. There was the poem at the beginning and an excerpt from the introduction of the book there, correct?
Exactly. Yes. It's the poem that kicks off the whole thing. And then that was the last part of the introduction. So that is the part that leads into chapter 1.
Chapter 1. Excellent. Great start to there. And anybody that's listening to the music too, I did the soundtrack for the book. So it's a really unique listening/reading experience. So there's 15 chapters, or I guess it'd be 15 chapters, including the intro and outro of the book. So the album is aligned as such with, there's actually extended versions of the songs. So gives you plenty of time, depending on what reader speed you have, to be able to listen to a chapter that correlates with the book, which is a really cool experience. It was neat listening to you. We had a group call a few nights ago where you did some of the passages from different chapters with the music in the background. It's a really cool experience.
It is. It's cool reading it out loud. And as somebody who has read this book like 15 times now, it is definitely an elevated reading experience when you have the soundtrack behind the reading too. It's really, really amazing and special. So
it sure is.
I'm very excited about it all.
Yeah, I'm really happy that we were able to do this, podcast today and because there was a period where you weren't quite sure. I mean, you hear the usual publisher, when they have third parties that are helping with things, they kind of give you this buffer zone of 72 hours, or it could be this day or that day. And it just so happened to show up this morning at time of recording. So we're at June 28th now. So it is live on Amazon right now.
It is,
which is amazing. So just the timing, the stars aligned for us for doing this podcast today, because it's been out for a matter of hours at this point, really, hasn't it?
Yep. My copies I ordered, so those are going to be in a little over a week. It is already available on Amazon, so yeah, it's very exciting. I've had a few people order it, so looks like it's a pretty quick delivery for some people, so I'm very excited about it. It's really cool to see it all come to life and to see it.
Yeah, absolutely. To hold it in your hands, I imagine that was probably such a trip, right? Just like to get that finished product and be like, wow, this is my vision put to book. Like to actually see the finished product is quite a trip, I imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. It's
you cut out. You're good now. You cut out for like 3 or 4 seconds there.
Okay. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yeah, it was just a pause. Yeah.
Going. All right.
Dang, eh?
Yeah. So where do you want me to start answering your question?
Yeah. So just the holding of it in your hands, the actual physical book.
Okay. Yeah. Cool. The headphones started to go out too. Dang. So I couldn't fully hear you. All right. It's definitely a trip. It's when I first, received the proof and saw my name on the cover and held the book and, flipped through it and saw my words on the page. It was definitely a trip. It's really exciting. It's cool. It still is like, I really did that, huh? And definitely holding it made it feel that much more real, of course.
Absolutely. So we're going to get into the whole story of the book, the creation process, and what made you, want to write a book in the first place and all that. Before I do though, I still want to get into a few of the details. So you are giving away, or not giving away, but you're selling like the autographed copies. I'd like to just have an opportunity for folks that are interested, they liked what they heard, intrigued by that intro you gave. Just give us a little bit of like the promos that you have going on right now.
Sure. So I have it. Obviously it's on Amazon, and then I am waiting on my copies to come in. So I have it available for pre-order on my website at clearheaded.me. And then there's a tab called The Moment That You're In, and or The Moment You're In, and adding words to the title there. And that is where you can pre-order a signed copy. I'm supposed to get those in on July 7th, which from now is about 9 days away. Mm-hmm. So I'll be shipping them out as soon as I get them in, and sign them, of course. They are the same price as they are on Amazon. And I have free shipping on those. Nice. So, and then if you have Amazon Prime, there's free shipping that way too. So, definitely excited to get those out. I've had a few people also order them on Amazon that live close, and I'll definitely sign those for people too. So it's funny, the whole signing a book. I kind of laughed at myself for that. And I had it requested, and that's why I did it, because there were a few people that were like, I want a signed copy. And I was like, oh, yeah.
I guess that's the thing, right?
That's part of it. So
So
that's been fun.
And speaking of part of it, is there release plans as far as I imagine we sort of talked about this in our group call, like a podcasting circuit that you'll do as far as just doing basically any sort of pressers or that type of thing for, I know that you have something planned for July. So just an opportunity to talk about that a little bit as well.
Definitely. Yeah. Working on going on podcasts, talking about it for sure. That's a big thing that I'm doing. I'm planning a launch party, so definitely excited for that. I'm going to keep the first one pretty small and low key. It's going to be at my house. So that's exciting though. And then talking about different ideas for book signings. I know that, I do women's workshops at a flower garden. So we've talked about doing book signings there. So yeah, I mean, being a first time author, it's just excited to do these things for the first time. Right. So anything that's coming up is very exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. And just for my side of things, you can find the album. I believe it's like a promo right now that we just have it on permanent lock for now, where you can get the album. I couldn't quite get it for free on Bandcamp. So it's Matt W. Gardner, my name, at bandcamp.com. And I believe there's a link to it off of your Amazon page as well, where you can get it for like $1 or something like that. Is correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's well worth it.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I'm very happy how it turned out. So I love the idea of the project. I think it marvelous how it all came together, isn't it?
Definitely. Yeah. There's definitely some ideas swirling in my head for like written meditations that go along with it. And there's some visualizations in the book already, turning those into meditations. And it's all stemming from the soundtrack, because it's already, more than just a book. I should not do that to myself. Shouldn't myself either. It's more than, that it just like adds such a different element to it. And then off of that, you're like, oh, there could be so many more different things like those meditations or, reading it with the music in the back is a meditation in itself. So guided meditations I felt like I meditated after reading it just now. So
I love that. Yeah. So cool. Yeah. It reminds me, especially with the poem and all that too, like those pieces that you could easily take to like an open mic night, you know what I mean? And do, which I know you and I have talked about, in person as well. There is, I think to me, it's like just the initial, like getting it out. Obviously there's like, we had set countdowns or deadlines, whatever you want to call them. So to get it out, but now that it is out, it sort of frees up this extra energy to go, oh, what else can we do with this now? So I like how sounds like we're on the same wavelength that way. Like it's out there. So what else can we do? And then to me, that's just different layers of being able to promote it and kind of keep it fresh and keep it in people's heads. There's so many different layers that we can do over the next year plus, if we wanted to, really, isn't there?
Exactly. I mean, you think about it, the idea for the book only came out in November. So as much as it felt like there were some periods of waiting, like it was a very fast process.
Very fast, yeah.
And you're going to feel like that when you write a book in 3 months. Then there's waiting. So
yes,
yeah, it's been amazing, and it's only the beginning being so new.
And we're working our way back to like the whole genesis of it, which is great. But before we do is like, what is your feeling now? Because like for me, I know when I would release an album, there was like an immediate like cathartic release where it was like almost it came to this like head, right? And then as soon as it was actually released and I could kind of take my hands off of it, this massive energetic like cathartic release happened. And then I found that I had this massive influx of creativity right after, because there was like no blockages, or there's no, the focus wasn't on there anymore, right? So have you had anything like that? Like are you already like, oh, and for the next book, you know what I mean? Like tell me a little bit about what's going on in your body and your head right now.
Well, and we've talked about it where since November, I feel like I'm a different person than I was then. And the stuff is all still very, very relevant in my day. I mean, I'm reading this book and I'm like, oh yeah, listen to yourself, Kaitlynn. And yeah, there's a lot of that going on of like, well, if I wrote a book from November to January now, and I like to, be inside in the winter and retreat a bit, like, is there a book of winter coming? And I'm also working on staying in the moment I'm in and enjoying this book. And there is also a big shift in energy where this book was mine as I was writing it and before it was released. And now, and I read this in another book, it's everybody else's. Like they're going to take this and they're going to look at it and they're going to compare it to their experiences and their life. And through their lens, they're going to read it. And it may have a completely different meaning for them than it did for me when I wrote it. So it's as much as it's mine, I'm releasing ownership and sharing it now, which is a very, very cool feeling.
Definitely. Yeah. And when you're talking about the book signing, there's that one book that we've been talking about. I'm not sure if you had a chance to get into, like called The Ultimate Coach, which is like Steve Hardison. It's like the whole idea is like you're your own ultimate coach. At first I was like, this is pretty egotistical. This guy's just, I mean, he's got this like awesome, amazing track record and such. But the whole idea with his book signings is he makes the people sign their own books because it's like their reflection of their life and his life sort of thing. There's like that trade-off, which is very much kind of what you're talking about here. So yeah, it was interesting too. When you're talking book signing, I was kind of thinking that too. I'm like, I could, yeah, I don't know, just gears going in my head more than anything, just sort of an idea. But yeah, cool stuff.
Any self-improvement book, you could do that, right?
Right. At the end of the day, I think
I'm
so.
giving this to you for you. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, let's go back. So you talked about like the genesis of this book started in November of last year. Just tell us a little bit about it. Like what voice came up? Like how did it come into your, line of vision, or, in your head? Was it a meditation? Just a little bit about like where this whole idea came from.
Sure. Was it a meditation, or was it a bunch of meditations where I kept hearing it?
Right, okay.
I will give you some credit here. The morning routine that has been instilled in me in your programs is a big reason for this book, because I took that time to sit and listen to myself and to be with myself in the morning. And that's where I started really hearing the whispers turn into, screams at one point of, you need to write this book, or you want to write this book. And I had talked about it for years, even back way before I was ready. I mean, I always liked the creative writing side of things. And yeah, I mean, feeling so connected to myself and really confident in what I knew, and learning that confidence within myself, and like being okay with sharing it. Also getting to a point where I knew that like my pattern to hide or to retreat was something that was really holding me back. And I wanted to put myself out there and to get my message out there. And for me, it was like, well, how do I want to do this? What way feels authentic to me? Like, I'm not really the type to like push my message and try so hard to get everybody to hear it. And I really wanted it out there for the people that would connect with it and would align with it. So that's where I started really hearing that the book was a really great way to go with that, because I could write it and I could put it out there, and then whoever wanted it could take it, do what they would with it.
Yeah. Awesome. And let's get a little bit into the layout of the book, because I think it's really, really well done. It is a story, like your story. And then it sort of mutates isn't the right word. It transforms into like a self-development book, and through the lens of how you developed yourself. So you talk about it in your story, this the character arc of, kind of hitting these lows in your life and these things that you've navigated, and then your hero's journey through it. And through that lens, I think that's when it really becomes a collaborative experience to the reader, where it's like you almost take on the role, as you mentioned at the beginning part there, like you walking into your role as a coach, and then you start, essentially flexing those muscles a little bit and going, hey, this is the work that I did on myself. And it has that like interpersonal feel to it in the later chapters. So was that intentional? Just tell us a little bit about the writing process. Did you have the scaffolding? Did you have the 15 chapters or the 13 chapters laid out, and then you filled in the blanks from there? Like a little bit about the writing process itself for you.
I did. I had a notes page on my phone, and it was like introduction. I wrote the introduction separately. And then it was the introduction, which I already had done. And then I wrote conclusion and what I wanted to call that. And then I filled in the chapters in between. And there was one point that I added a couple, but for the most part, it stayed in that structure. The ones that I added were nourish and movement that I didn't have in there at first. And I started to really learn about that stuff with myself, and took on a whole different meaning for it. So that felt really important to include. If I wrote it now, the chapters may be different. And I love the way that they turned out for the me that I was at that time. And, still reading it back, I'm like, like I said, like it still is for sure the book that I needed at the time. So that's exciting to see that. I heard once that you write the book that you need, and that's 100% true there. And yeah, I mean, so I laid out the chapters, and then I locked myself in my Zen Den closet for a while. And, you know, it would be like, I would sit down to write, and 2 hours later I had, you know, 8,000 words written. And I really didn't know necessarily what all I had written. I had a basic idea of it, but it was like, I would go into this, like, I've described it as a trance. I've described it as channeling, where the words were coming through me. And so that was really special too. And like when I reread it back, I can see where that was happening. And it's very cool just how like in flow it was. Yeah. And then I didn't even write it in order. So I would, you know, go in and it would be like, well, what's really on my mind today? Like, what am I really focusing on? Where's my intention right now? And I would go into that chapter and I would write about my experience. So it starts with my story, starts from childhood, goes through teenage years, high school, college years, after college, and then to present day. And you see like that my struggles with myself really started before I could even remember. And then I just kept letting those compound and without realizing it. And it got to the point where I was really losing myself and losing control. And, you know, wake up call after wake up call, I finally got my loudest wake up call, which is in there. And I decided to start, you know, changing and working on myself. And then, so I talk about that journey in my story. And then after my story, I go into the chapters where it's all about the tools and lessons that I learned to bring myself back into the moment and back present, and the tools that I still use because we are humans and slipping out of the moment happens. It happens to me. It happens to all of us. And it's really, really cool when you realize and you can have the awareness of that happening and pull yourself back to the now. Whereas in a lot of my early life, I was not ever living in the moment. I was very much in the past and in the future, or very rarely living in the moment. And I was in the past and in the future. And that was what was causing so much of my anxiety, because I wasn't focusing on the now.
Yeah. That's yeah, a lot on there that came up for me for sure. And it's like, you know, we're doing this on you know, sobriety podcast and all that, and that is a component of a big part of your story, right? And I think it goes beyond, so it works very well being on Beyond Recovery. It's very much you know, how you've been living since, right? And part of your story, yes, was the sobriety, but I think there's so much more to it, you know, in the book itself as well, right? So just for folks that are curious about that aspect of it, it's definitely, I'd say your story is you know, fairly heavy on like that whole sobriety journey, and it's a very important, you know, like the foundation. I, you know, don't want to put words in your mouth, but the foundation of you know, the person that you become today, right? So that is definitely part of it that speaks to me, you know, in the work that we've done as well. Yeah, just a little bit more about like the actual like book writing process, and then I want to get into some of the themes of the chapters and such. What was it like? So you have this like trance-like state, and you know, this flow, and everything's coming to you. It's just like this download almost that you've gotten, right, that you're acting upon. And then there is a stage that you know, you start having to reach out for help from other people. You don't really know like the editing process, never done it, first time author. So what was it like when you got into that stage of things? You know, as far as like the learning curve, and then perhaps the self-doubt that came along with it, like, oh shit, this is taking some shape. Just walk us through that, because I imagine there's a lot of people that just can't even get to that threshold, because it's like, oh, now there's going to be other people involved, and it just sort of sits on their shelf and they never release it. And you broke through that. So yeah, what was that like for you?
Yeah, it definitely, there is that. Like you're like, okay, cool, like I wrote a book, but where do I go from here? And I very much relied on connections, where I was introduced to different authors, a few that have written one book, and recently gone through a publishing process. I found my publisher through a connection. So it's, for me, like, collaboration is really big, especially me with like one other person. Everything about the book came from people I know. My publisher, who is also my editor, was a connection. My cover art is a very, very good friend of mine. The soundtrack is you. So everything came through a collaboration. I was going to go somewhere else with that.
Okay.
Even like the channeling aspect of it, like, that felt like collaborating in it.
Sure.
And it was still scary to bring other people in on it, especially the publisher. Everybody else I had somewhat known before that. And I remember I was talking to you or texting with you, and I was like, I'm worried that I have this fear that she's just going to be like, that's trash. Right. And like, it was like the next day that I got the email from her, and she was like, this book is going to be great, and people are really going to connect with this. And like, it's like those things that we do to ourselves to self-sabotage ourselves, where like, you worry about something and then it comes back and it's like actually better than you could have imagined what they have to say.
Right.
That being said, editing is not my thing, and she had some work to do there. I'm very much like the creative in flow writing. Like I said, like, there were times where I didn't even remember what I was writing. So that was something that it took someone with more structure to do for me. And that's why they're there. I think that's a common thing. Even when I was talking to other authors, they were like, yeah, like, being the creative one, or a creative mind, that's pretty common. We're sitting down and getting granular and editing, because even for me, like, reading it, like the grammar errors, or missing commas, that kind of thing, like, I read through that because I know what it says. And it's just very interesting how it can be such my work, and at the same time, like, you do need to bring other people in on it. It's scary. And when you reframe scary as exciting, and it means you're about to break through something, and you're about to get to the other side of something, and you're about to grow and learn and expand. And I really am curious how many manuscripts there are out there that only manuscripts.
Countless.
That happens. And when you're putting stuff in a book, especially like your own story and your own dark shadows, it's really scary to share that with people. And it's really scary because you're scared of people telling you that you shared too much or you overshared. I was very careful with who I shared my book with in the process. And I didn't realize it until after, but it was like, anyone that I let read it told me to be more vulnerable.
Right.
Or like talked about the areas in the book where I could expand more. And I'm like, oh, I was brushing over that because of my fear of putting it out there. Yes, so it's interesting. Yeah, definitely who you like let in. I was also very protective of the book. Nobody knew about it until it was like, well, very few people knew about it until it was like 2/3 of the way done. Because I didn't want influence on it. I didn't want people to tell me like, it's not a good idea. It was, by the time I brought people in on it, it was happening. So it's very interesting, and I was very protective of it.
Yeah. Which I love that about the process. So one of the things that they came up to is, like, I've noticed, because you had it more or less done and it was handed to the editor and such, and there was, I'd say, some fairly big pockets of time when you look at the whole process from November till now, that it was sort of in that, the middle ground, right, of the editing. Then you say you have to read it 15 times and all that. And that, that is part of the process, not necessarily the most desirable, but was there anything, I guess, that you learned from that? Or was there any times where you're just like, man, this is such a slog? Like, how did it change your perspective in that like middle ground period? It's almost, I would say, it's like the hurry up and wait. Like, as an artist, you have the process, and then it's almost like you wait double the amount of time then for it to finally get released.
Definitely. I mean, it was because it was November to the beginning of January. Right. So it was not even 3 months, and now it's June.
Wow.
So yeah, I mean, it
So,
was about 3 months to write it and 6 months to do everything else. So
yeah.
big time hurry up and wait.
Yeah.
And I think, or I know that for me, that attributed to some resistance because
Mm.
I did it in like this like very me fashion where it's like, I'm going to do this now, which is which is something I do.
Yeah.
And then to wait is like to give me that time to, which is also a very me pattern, to overthink things.
Mm.
And so then I did it, sent it off, and then I'm like, well, maybe I shouldn't say this. Maybe I shouldn't talk about this. This person's going to know that I'm talking about them if they read it. People that will likely not know the book exists because I haven't talked to them in 10 years. I'm worried about them reading my book.
Right.
And they may. And I've gotten to the point now where I'm like, if it does get in their hands and they read it and they see that and they can remember that that was them, then that's what's meant to be. I'm sharing my story. I didn't like call anybody out by name in the shadow parts of the story. It was very, very important to me. This goes back to the writing process, that it was mine and that it was about me. I'm very much, sometimes to a fault, into taking responsibility for my life. I gave that away for so long. So that was another part of being protective of it, was that I wanted it to be mine as long as it could be, right? Until it was released to be others. Yeah.
I think that's what makes it so easily transferable to somebody else's story too, right? You were so protective over it. You raised it, so to speak, as if it were your own child, and it has that like personalized feel to it. So then when it is presented to somebody else, I imagine it makes it so much easier for somebody to just take that on, because it's already so like customized and personalized, right?
For sure. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, there are some people too that it may not be for, and choosing to be okay with that is a thing too. That's another reason that I would stop a lot, is because I was afraid of disappointing people, or afraid people would think that it wasn't good. Like I said, like the whole, like, it's trash, like that's just a voice in my head. And yeah, breaking free of that and knowing that I'm putting it out there for the people that I align with and that align with me. And I was on a retreat and we were talking about, I said that I feared disappointing people. And the question that was posed to me was, what if you have to disappoint people to reach the people that need this? And it's like, it totally made sense. Like, it was like, how can you put your message fully out there if you're too scared of people who aren't going to like it? Because there's always going to be someone who doesn't like it.
For sure, of course. And I think we know enough, in the work that we've done, that's something that they don't like about themselves, that is getting mirrored, and they're not quite ready at the stage to hear that about themselves, so.
And that's okay.
And that's completely okay. Yeah, everybody's on a different timeline and a different journey, which is
that's in there.
Underlying theme of the book as well, right?
Yeah.
Speaking of, let's get into a few of the different themes. Like, sure. One of the ones that's come up before you even started rolling was like talking about patterns, right? So, and I really like that side of it. So yeah, what were some of the, I guess just that'll be the topic, patterns. What do you have to say about it? Whether it was like something about the book, patterns that you've learned about yourself, just, yeah, the topic of patterns.
Sure. So patterns are something that I learned about. And when I first started learning about my patterns, I wanted to figure them out so that I could stop them. And now I've learned that my patterns are part of me. I've picked them up somewhere where, in the book, I describe it as when I learned to survive. That's when my patterns came about. They kept me safe. So I love my patterns. That being said, I'm very aware of them. And I also talk about this, where like when we try to fight the patterns and fight the ego and fight against everything and fight against ourselves, and we're our biggest competition, that's where, for me, it creates a struggle and this like inner war. And when you start to love the ego and love the patterns, and they're going to fight back. If you fight against them, they're going to fight back. If you love them and they're like, okay, we're cool, and they can be quiet. They don't have to be as loud then. So that's a really big thing that comes up in, there's a whole chapter on patterns, and then patterns come up in the other chapters too. The book has some spots, some very underlying themes, some things that repeat throughout it. And that is intentional, because those are the things that I repeat to myself and that I keep relearning. So yeah, as Mark England would say, repetition is the mother of all skill. So I definitely learned that and agree with that. Yeah, patterns is a big one, and patterns can really pull you out of the moment too. Whether it's people pleasing, worrying about what people are going to think, because that's worrying about the future. Whether it's, destination based or achiever patterns, because that again is looking into the future or looking into the past and saying like, oh, this at this point I didn't get this done, so now I need to like make up for that. Or looking into the future and being like, oh, I want to get ahead. Whereas like, what do you actually want in this moment? What would actually set you up for that? Slowing down to speed up, another big pattern or another big theme. Because hustle and grind culture is also a pattern where we want to just keep, trying to move up and move up and move up without enjoying where we're at. And then where do you get to where you're okay with it, where you're comfortable, where you are able to enjoy the moment, or do you just keep doing that for the rest of your life?
Totally. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, there's a lot on the bone there for that one, for patterns. The opposite side of patterns, for me, the flip side of the coin is finding presence, because we're talking about being pulled out into the future or the past. So what is presence for you? Like, I mean, now to summarize, the theme of the book essentially in a lot of ways, or one of the key themes, to the point that it's the name of the book, the moment you're in. What does presence mean to you now? And I guess just a summary of that as a topic as well.
Yeah. So how I found my presence in the present. Presence is being in the present. Presence is being where you're at. And there are people that I've said, I'm like, when you're cooking, I did this in the beginning. When you're cooking, tell yourself out loud what you're doing, because cooking is a big one, because you're cooking to make the food to eat it. So do you even focus on what you're doing? This is all in the nourish chapter too. And a lot of times it was like, I would just like try to like throw some meal together just to eat it, to move on with my life. And how much time do we spend cooking and eating? And we're giving that away to get to the next thing. So I would say, like, I'm cutting an avocado. I am putting a piece of bread in the toaster. I am putting this ground beef in a skillet. And I would say it out loud to myself. And that's something that I've passed down to people now. If I like see them getting frazzled, I'm like, what are you doing right now? Bring yourself back and tell yourself out loud what you're doing. You can even make a song out of it. I've done that before too. And yeah. And so that's a big part of presence for me, is being where you are. I say it to myself, like if I feel myself getting pulled, I'm like, be here now. And yeah, letting, a lot of times for me, it's like shame from the past or guilt from the past. And then the future is anxiety. So either one of those things, if I'm in the present, I'm grateful, I'm still, I'm calm, I'm balanced. So I can very much recognize those energies. I mean, when I get anxious about what I have to do tomorrow, that's a big one. Or I feel guilty about something I did or I said yesterday. Yeah.
I think, like the two words that come to mind for me with presence, to like stay and remain, like you said, gratitude for sure. And choice, right? Because the choice is now, like you can choose something now, as opposed to, I mean, obviously you can do it in the future, but that when the future is now, that's when you can make the choice, right? So, and that dissolves a lot of that, the resentments or the shame and that sort of thing too. So, but yeah, I love that. Yeah, that's a really good summary. Thank you. The other thing that came up for me is like, when we're talking about patterns, and just a final thought on it, for me, some patterns are, and like I like what you mentioned, it's like they serve you for, especially like younger, when I was in my younger years, there was definitely a lot that helped me, learn how to work, like get a work ethic, you know what I mean? Certain things like this, learn how to learn, and they were like repetitions and patterns. And at a certain point, the older I got, I found I was doing a lot of stuff like on autopilot, you know what I mean? Especially when I threw in substances, Yeah. And I found there's just a lot of behind the scenes stuff. Even my drive to work, I'd just be like zoned out, not even really remember driving there. I think a lot of people have had that happen before. So just the idea of like being able to snap yourself out of this like autopilot that I find, and I'm curious how it's been for you. The older I get, the more repetitious and more autopilot I get, unless I pause myself or pull myself back into the moment. Has that been the same experience for yourself?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's because our mind is not here. It's somewhere else. It's somewhere in the past or the future. And it's one of those like simple but not easy things, because it sounds so simple when I say it, and it's difficult to train yourself. I shouldn't say difficult. It takes conscious, mindful effort to start to train yourself. And yeah, I mean, the autopilot feeling was huge for me, especially like you said, when drinking. And the book, there's a lot of themes in there that don't necessarily have to do with drinking, and it is a big part of my story. So yes, sobriety is mentioned quite a few times in the book when I'm talking about myself. And there's still a lot of takeaways from it, even for somebody who isn't sober, because it's that autopilot feeling can be anything. I mean, I still get it. It's just a lot lesser of a feeling. I mean, there are still times where I'm like, I just drove, from point A to point B, and like there's a little piece in there where I don't know where I was. So yeah, it's interesting. And like even like going on walks, which is to ground me and to center me. A lot of the times, like it'll be the beginning where it's like my mind is a ping pong ball and I'm not necessarily in it. And then I know I've talked about this before. By the end of it, I feel very centered and very balanced and aligned. So there are different habits that you can do to help bring yourself back to the moment. Biggest thing is spending time with yourself and really listening to yourself. I've in the car now, that autopilot feeling, there's times where I'll feel it happening and I'll turn off the radio. And that helps a lot, just being in silence.
Yeah. So you've talked about nature walks, turning off the radio, sitting in silence. You talk about essentially doing an inner dialogue, running commentary of whatever you may be doing. You mentioned the cooking part as being a hand in hand with one of the chapters that you mentioned as well, Nourish. Choosing to use food as an artistic experience as opposed to just fueling us up for that next thing that we're on to, you know what I mean? Which is a great concept. I know that's been a big part of your journey as well. I have a couple of fun sort of rapid fire questions that are about the book here as we wrap things up as well. But Kaitlynn, thank you so much for coming on and sharing about the book. And I'm honored that you'd be the first podcast of the tour, hours into the digital release of the book. You did freeze up there. Did you hear most of what I said?
Yeah. Thank you for coming on and sharing about the book.
That's so funny. I'm like totally putting you over. I'm like, are you even hearing me right now? Yeah. Okay. And I'm honored that you would come on, my podcast first, like hours after the release. Just cool how it worked out. A couple rapid fire questions for you though. So what is your personal favorite chapter of the book right now? I'm sure it can fluctuate. What would be your favorite chapter?
I'm going to say my story. There are a lot, and my story is where I find the most personal growth, because I am putting myself out there and letting go of all the things I thought I had to hide about myself for so long. So my story is where I see my personal expansion the most.
Cool. Love it. Do you foresee it being as this book as being able to be used as almost like a textbook? Like, could you foresee yourself using it in a coaching situation, basically base your content off of it? I know we've talked about it before. Now that you have the book in your hands, could you see it, being used as such?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the chapters are all mostly like one word, realization, patterns, recreation. And they're all different like lessons that I've learned. So that would only make sense that they would translate. And there are also places in the book to write. So there are times where I give you a prompt and I tell you to write here. So I don't know how many, near 5 of those spots where I tell you, writing has been really big. So there's a lot of different things that I know, like it can start the thought swirling. So right there in real time, you can write it out.
Absolutely. Get your pen out, right? The magic wand again.
Yeah, so have a pen too.
Yeah. Yes. Awesome. Do you foresee a sequel coming up? Is there going to be the moment you're in too, or moment that you're in?
Oh, you're adding words.
Okay, sorry.
I did it first. Okay.
Yeah. The moment you're in. There we go. Got it.
Sequel. I don't know that it'll be a sequel, and it'll likely stem from it. Like it may be able to be called a sequel or to be like the continuation.
Yes.
And I think that the wording would change. I mean, I know your podcast, other podcasts, like the question at the end of what advice I would give. What I said for so long was all you have is the moment you're in. And that's where the title was born from. And there's been some more one-liners since then that I've thrown out there that would likely be the title of this one.
Cool. Okay. So it'd be sort of like under like the same collection and some of the same themes, not necessarily a direct sequel, but definitely some thematical extension.
I do see like the same style cover and like that kind of thing. Like
a
collection. Yeah, definitely.
Very cool. A series, perhaps. Yes. Yeah. Cool. I just wanted to, put you on the spot with that. Because I can definitely see that too, right? It's like, there's just a lot to it. And I think to me, it feels like just the beginning in a lot of ways. Like it's out there now. And like, there's just going to be so much that can branch off out of this. So final question, what is your favorite song of the soundtrack?
That's harder than my favorite chapter. They're all so good.
I like that answer.
I really, really like the one for Breathe.
Cool. Breathe. Awesome. Okay.
That's just the first one that's coming to my mind right now. I love all of them so much.
Very cool.
They all go so well with the chapters. Like if I was picking them, that's exactly what I would have done. They're great.
And it's, obviously I wanted you as the guest today. It's about you, but I will share, like there was for the music, there was very much like the fact that you gave me the words. I very much was like, okay, how is this word making me feel? And then finding sounds on the keyboard that, you know what I mean? Like had some kind of correlation, picking a tempo that I felt would sort of, so just very much like trying to intuitively, and then plus you gave me an advanced copy of the book, which helped as well. So, you know what I mean? I had like kind of an idea of like the scope of the book and the flow of the book as well. So just to kind of put all that together was a really unique experience for myself as well. I've never done, as you know, I've done like some sound therapy albums, but I've never like done a soundtrack or something quite like this. So it was a really cool experience for myself. That'll be like I'll do a bonus podcast on that some other time, but just wanted to throw a little bit of my own little creation and how it came to be as well at the end. So speaking of, do you want to do a little outro here, or perhaps a read again? I imagine we were talking about that excerpt from Patterns, and that seemed to be a theme of our interview here. Yeah, let's do that. Sure. I'll cue it up here. This read comes directly after one of the right here pages too, which I just noticed. So very cool. Very cool. Let me start the music here. There we go. So this is the song Patterns. This is Kaitlynn reading from the book. Perfect. How we grow up has a lot to do with who we become. That is part of being a human being. What if the point is to avoid becoming anything? What if we are here to learn, to feel, to experience the moment we are in? This brings me full circle, back to another place we visited previously. Another area that can breed patterns, and that is putting the emphasis on the destinations instead of the journey. Destination-focused living is another common reason for pattern development. When looking toward the next big thing, we ignore the little things. We also may need to remember our true selves or what the universe is trying to tell us to get to our goals. What happens if we don't hit those goals? Do we think less of ourselves? The example from earlier about becoming a workaholic for a promotion is one that we can use here again. How many promotions will there be? For most of us, that is a ladder we climb without end. So we create this pattern of working so hard, and for what? What happens after we get the promotion? More money? What are we going to do with that money? What is the next destination we can get to? Bigger house. So then we spend so much time focused on the house. If I can get that bigger house, I will be happy now. You are creating a pattern that bases your worth on getting to the next destination, causing being in the moment to be nearly impossible. Another common theme of this book,
Joy and happiness are not there to be found. They are a state of being and a choice you can make now. Any voices that tell you you will be happy when you get to a destination, whether the house, the marriage, kids, or a goal weight, are lying to you. They are speaking from the pattern and not the accurate you. The true self knows joy is found in each moment you're in.
Awesome. Thanks, Kaitlynn. We'll share all the links in the show notes and The Moment You're In.
You got it.
By Kaitlynn MIKA.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks for coming on today.
Thank you so much for having me.